Hi class, Mrs. Calvi here. Today we're going to be talking about integers, and integers are basically numbers and their opposites. So if you notice here, I have a number line. I have 0 in the center, in the middle, and then all of my numbers to the right are positive, and then all of my numbers to the left of 0 are negative. All right, so remember, integers are numbers and their opposites. So we are going to be talking about how to identify integers, and then we're going to also be talking about integers and their opposites a little bit more. So if I go to our page in our textbook, I have this chart here, and it says the results of 3 football plays are shown in the table. So the first result says we have a 4-yard gain. So how would we represent a 4-yard gain? The first thing we have to think about is, well, does a gain represent a positive number or does that represent a negative number? Well, if you think about you're gaining something, that's positive in this case, in football anyway. So if we're gaining 4 yards, that's going to be represented by a positive 4, or 4, because 4 and positive 4 mean the same thing. Now, in football, if we have a 1-yard loss, that's not so great, and that is going to be represented by a negative 1. You're losing 1 yard, so negative 1. And the last one, if we have a 4-yard loss, well, we are losing 4 yards. That's going to be represented by a negative 4. All right, so now let's take a look. If we were talking about something other than football, let's say we were talking about money, and you are spending, let's say, $25 on school supplies. So you're spending $25. How would I represent that as an integer? Now, would that be a positive 25 or would that be a negative 25? Well, if you're spending money, you're giving some of your money up, you are going to represent that as a negative 25, right? Now, let's say we are depositing money into our bank account. So we are going to deposit, let's say, $50. So if you are depositing money into your bank account, that means you are putting money into your bank account. Would we represent that as a positive 50 or a negative 50? Well, we're putting money into our savings account, right? So we are saving money, and we are going to represent that as a positive 50. Now, typically when you see positive integers, you will not see a positive symbol in front. You will just see the number itself because they mean the same thing. So typically you wouldn't even see this positive sign here. All right. So, all right, we talked about money. We talked about football. Let's say we were talking about someone going snorkeling, let's say, and they were 10 feet below sea level. Well, how would we represent 10 feet below sea level? So 10 feet below sea level, let's see. So 10 feet below sea level. Well, sea level is going to be at 0, right? So if we're looking at our number line here, this 0 is representing sea level. So if we're going 10 feet below sea level, would we go to the left on our number line, or would we go to the right on our number line? Well, we're going below. We're going down, right? So I would be going to the left. So in order to represent 10 feet below sea level, I would write that integer as a negative 10. All right. Now let's say we were 5 feet above sea level. Well, 5 feet above sea level, 5 feet above sea level would be represented by a positive 5. Or remember, we don't need that positive sign. We could just put 5. All right. So now we also want to talk about integers and their opposites. So let's talk a little bit about integers and their opposites. When we talk about an integer, we're talking about a number and their distance from 0 on the number line. So let's say I'm looking at the number 4. Now 4 is how many units away from 0? Well, if we were to hop and we stay at 4 and we hop back to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 units away from 0. So integers are the distance they are from 0 on a number line. So if I wanted to know what the opposite of -4 is, I'm going to go 4 units on the other side of 0 on my number line. So 1, 2, 3, 4 units got me to 0. I'm going to continue going another 4 units, and that's going to give me my opposite of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposite is going to give me a -4, which kind of makes sense, right? So if I wanted to know what the opposite of 4 is, the opposite is going to be -4. The same distance away from 0 on both the left and right side of 0 on a number line. So let's say I had the number -12. So -12 is 12 units from 0 on the number line. Well, if I were to go 12 units in the other direction, what number would I then land at? I would then land at +12. So then that means that -12 and 12 are opposites. So 12 is the opposite of -12, and -12 is the opposite of 12. Pretty simple, all right? So you just have to remember it's the distance the number is from 0 on the number line, okay? Okay, let's take a look at my question here. It's a little tricky, but if you really think about it, it's not so hard. It says, what is the opposite of the opposite of 9? So what is the opposite of the opposite? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to first figure out what the opposite of 9 is. That's what we're going to do first. So the opposite of 9. The opposite of 9, you should now know, is -9. Well, that's not our final answer because they're asking what the opposite of this is now. Well, what is the opposite of -9? Now you can tell me that the opposite of -9 is going to be 9, and that would be your final answer. So the first thing we did was we found the opposite of 9, which was the -9. And then we found the opposite of -9, which is back to +9. All right, so if you kind of break out that question, it's not so hard. When you first read it for the first time, it's almost a tongue twister. You're asking yourself, what are they even asking me? But if you actually break the question up, it's not so hard to understand, okay? Okay, a few more examples. Let's say we said that the temperature increased by 2 degrees. So if the temperature increased by 2 degrees, how can I represent that as an integer? Would that be a +2 or would that be a -2? Well, if it's increasing, we would say that that is a +2. Or remember, we just can write the number 2 when it's a positive. Now, if I changed what this said, and I had this say that the temperature decreased, let's say the temperature decreased, let's say 5 degrees. So the temperature decreased 5 degrees. If it decreased 5 degrees, would that be a +5 or a -5? Well, it's going down, so that would be a -5. So to represent that as an integer, we would write -5. All right, guys, I will talk to you soon.